John here with another harebrained story. I've discussed our sailing ship that back in 1978-79, Sheila and I, we sailed from Thunder Bay, Ontario, through the Great Lakes, down the eastern seaboard, over into the Bahamas. And so on our trip from Fort Lauderdale into Bimini, that's one story, but we got to Bimini, and I'll tell that story later. But today we're going to talk about the whale story. So what happened, we got to Bimini and we were with 3 other boats. They had already left, because the story I will eventually tell you about our sailing across from Fort Lauderdale to Bimini, which is in the Bahamas. We had some problems when we did that. But so anyway, we finally get to Bimini and we're ready to leave, and you head across east, across the, I think it's the banks of whatever, I don't know, the Bahama Banks or whatever. And you're going from, where we were going was from Bimini to Chub Key, and then from there we were going to go eventually to Nassau. The trip from Bimini to the Chub Key is 12 feet of water, okay? So you can see the bottom, beautiful clear water in the Bahamas for like probably 100 miles of just motoring, because there was no wind that day anyway, which was good, so we just motored. We're trying to catch up. Our friends had actually left the day before because we had some problems, like I say, in the crossing from Fort Lauderdale to Bimini. So our friends had left the day before from Bimini to head to Chub Key, and they had already gotten to Chub Key when we finally head out. So we're going to try to go the full route in one day, and what they had done is they'd stopped halfway across this shallow area and just anchored overnight, and then proceeded the next day, the extra 4 or 5 hours into Chub Key. So we are going to try to do it all in one day, because our boat's a little bigger and faster, so we're motoring, and so we can probably get away with it. So one thing about this Bahama Banks, what do they call it? And one thing interesting about Bahamas, there's no hills in the Bahamas. If the water rose 20 feet in the Bahamas, there would be no Bahamas. If the water dropped 20 feet in the Bahamas would be a huge country, because that 12 feet, which is what we sailed over, would have now been dry land. And so, and that's a big area. So anyway, we're coming to, and what happens when you get to the end of that 12-foot area, it literally drops off in the banks, it really drops to 6,000 feet deep from 12. And so we're motoring along and we're in the 12-foot area, but I'm looking ahead, and we've been in the meantime on radio contact with our friends that were already anchored out at the place where we're going to that night. And we've been talking to them on the radio, saying we're this far, we're going to be there, we'll be there in another 4 or 5 hours or whatever. And so I'm motoring along, and Sheila's down below, and I see some spouts, whale spouts, blowing, off in the distance. I can't tell how big or otherwise they are or anything about it, but I obviously recognize that we're just about to come off this shoal area of the 12-foot and drop into that big, huge, the deep area, the 6,000 foot, drop off. And I'm obviously thinking, okay, well, that's where the whales are, because they wouldn't be in the 12-foot area, because they're almost too big to be in that shallow depth. So I tell Sheila to call on the radio to our friends and just let them know that we're coming into a pod of whales. At least that's what it looks like. And so she looks up and she can't see them. I guess they'd sounded, in the meantime. And so she's reluctantly going to call, and I'm just trying to let them know that, we could be coming into a pod of whales. Who knows? There could be some danger to that. I'm not sure. Anyway, so she's down, and I can hear her. She's down, in the hatch, down below the hatch. She walks down a couple of feet down on the steps going down, the ladder going down, and she's talking on the radio. And I can hear her talking to some of our friends in the other boat, saying, "John wanted me to tell you, he thinks we're coming into a pod of whales." And then just the tone of her voice was like, she thinks I'm an idiot. Okay, so regardless, we just keep moving along, and and she's now talking to them, just chatting about what a dumbass her husband is, trying to suggest we're coming into this pod of whales. We keep moving forward, and I do see some spouting still, so obviously the whales are there, it looks like it. So we finally get into the deep water, and it's literally, you go from 12 feet to 3,000 or 4,000 feet, and then down to 6,000 feet deep right away. And so she's still yakking away to our friends on the other boats that are in anchorage already. And I say, "Sheila, come on up here quickly." And so she comes up, and so you literally, when you're coming up from the, you step up the ladder, you put your head out, and you're now above where you can see above the decking of the boat. And so she looked to the right, and right beside us, one of these whales, and I'm not kidding you, probably 1.5 the length of our boat. We're about 42-foot boat. Literally, that whale was looking down at her, one eye, and it was like probably 10 feet from the boat. And so she's been just sort of casually talking. She's still got the mic, and with the mic you got to click it to when you talk. So she comes up, she looks out, screams, "Yikes, we're getting a pack of whales." This whale was literally looking at her. Well, she screamed as loud as she could scream because she's freaked out. I think it freaked the whale because the whale went boom straight down, and some great tail fins as it submerged. And so anyway, that was kind of an interesting story. Now our friends are sort of concerned because we're out in the middle of, I'm not kidding you, there's no land in sight anywhere, and we're in 6,000 feet of water, and these whales are around, and who knows, I mean, presumably everything will be fine, which it turned out to be, but certainly pretty interesting to have. Really, there was 2 or 3 of them were really within almost reaching out, touching distance from the hull itself, and so pretty nice experience. But so we went on and sailed in, and eventually got into the harbor that evening, and had a great whale story to tell our buddies that were already there in the anchorage. Meantime, I want to talk about Gut Fix, and so Gut Fix is a natural antibody product that we have made. As a matter of fact, we've come up with this. It's an oral dose antibody that we get from vaccinating layer hens to stimulate their immune system to produce whatever we're targeting. And basically antibodies to reduce the inflammation in your gut. Basically that would be caused by bad bacteria that would overgrow in your gut microflora. So you take that every day. And by the way, I'm 74. The only supplement or anything, I'm on no medications otherwise. That's the only thing I take it every day. I've been taking it now for probably about 10 years. And I originally started taking it with the idea of, it was for originally fixing your gut, diarrhea primarily. And so I started taking it with the idea that, well, maybe there could be some negatives to it. So I started taking it every day. I'd had some severe osteoarthritis, shoulders and knees, very painful. I played rugby for 39 years, and so I had a lot of pain from that regard. My range of motion on my shoulders was about like that. Knees were in pain all the time. So after about 3 to 4 weeks of taking this, I woke up one morning and absolutely all my arthritic pain was gone completely. I started researching that as to why an antibody that we dose orally could have something to do with that, and lots of research. You can do it yourself, and how can the gut microbiome influence arthritic pain and things like that. And there is all kinds of of scientific evidence that shows that there definitely is a relationship between those types of things. Anyway, take a look at gutfix.com and have a look. Like I said, 74. I don't do any other supplements or drugs at all. No medications. I don't take vaccines for flu. Kind of nice to be able to take something as simple as that and it's safe. It's basically dried egg powder made into a tablet. Which tastes really good and something easy to take every day. Meantime, check out Gut Fix. Gut Fix yourself.